Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's long-range U.S.-focused forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. This analysis is being provided for perspective only, and any decision made based upon this presentation is the sole responsibility of the person making the decision. Finally, please remember that long-range weather forecasting is speculative by nature. Well, I do want to do a brief review of some of the stuff we saw in the last 24 hours. This is an animation from yesterday from our visible satellite imagery, and we saw some incredible thunderstorms that were moving over parts of the high plains, specifically in parts of Colorado, parts of Kansas, and Nebraska. Meanwhile, a weak upper-level disturbance was moving through parts of Minnesota, igniting storms that went through Minnesota, Wisconsin, and northern Illinois. And then we did see the boundary that brought the heavier rain through parts of Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. It did finally move south, hitting parts of the Mid-South, blowing up some thunderstorms down there. But those storms that we saw right here over parts of Nebraska, over parts of Kansas, and especially over Colorado were truly epic. In fact, we may have seen a hail record be broken in part of Colorado. I'll analyze it for you and put it in my video tomorrow morning. Looking at the last 24 hours of precipitation, we had mentioned how, given the timing, that we might kind of leapfrog over this part of Tennessee and Kentucky with our boundary here. So we saw storms fire to the north of it and to the south of it here. Meanwhile, you can see the northwest flow bringing those storms right here through parts of the high plains down into parts of Texas and Oklahoma, which some folks down there desperate for the relief here. And then again, with that weak upper level disturbance sliding through the north central United States into Minnesota and Wisconsin, brought some locally heavy rainfall out of those storms. Also, you can see parts of Ohio did pick up on some of the heavier rain. That's just in the last 24 hours. But over the last week, let's just take a look at how the systems have really formed over the last week to see who got the rain and who didn't get the rain. Parts of Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, right along the I-74 corridor especially, which kind of runs right in through here, missed out on a lot of the heavier rain, which was desperately needed in that area. Meanwhile, this section of the United States has been just incredibly wet over the last few days here. But come down a little bit farther to the south, especially down into parts of Texas, and things have been extremely dry. Outside of that, over the southeast, hit or miss showers and storms, and maybe a better way to look at this is just to take a look at the last 14 days in terms of percent of normal. So some of the questions we're going to have in the near term are we going to be able to bring more rainfall over here into the eastern part of the Corn Belt where we need it? Are we going to be bringing rainfall into parts of Texas? And is rainfall going to slow down in through this corridor right in through here? And is there something coming out of the tropics that could possibly bring a bit more uniform rainfall over parts of the southeast? Let's get in and try to answer some of those questions. We start first with the upper level flow, and it's quite unique right now across the open Pacific. We've had our typhoons that hit through parts of Japan and China. They have perturbed or kind of snapped the rope of the jet stream. And what's going on right now is the flow is doing something like this. And that is truly unique flow because we have this little piece down here as well. So in the Gulf of Alaska all the way to Hawaii, the flow pattern in the upper levels of the atmosphere is quite stagnant and blocked up. And across the United States, we actually have very zonal flow. So this always means when we have zonal flow like this at this time of year that it's cool to the north and very hot to the south. And we certainly have seen some incredible heat. Now, with zonal flow, we have to watch very, very subtle features in the flow of the jet stream, and they're likely to be not well forecast very much into the future. So given that analysis, let's go ahead and take a look at what we're expecting to see from our high-resolution NAM model, getting you all the way out into the day here on Friday to understand what our precipitation patterns are doing. So that just played out through 1 p.m. on Friday. Let me take you back and tell you what I'm watching. Throughout the day on Wednesday, watch in eastern parts of the Corn Belt. So this is 4, 5, 6 o'clock. We're going to have to watch for hit or miss showers and storms here. Also, the lingering boundary as it passes through parts of the southeast and down here toward the Gulf Coast. Maybe some thunderstorms showing up in that area. We're then going to keep our close eye in the overnight hours. So now I got you out here till this is early Thursday morning. Again, that flow coming out of the northwest. Watch for widely scattered showers and storms in the north central plains here on Thursday. So this is Thursday morning. Look, coming in through parts of Nebraska here could be an overnight convective event that gets into Kansas by the time we get in the middle of the afternoon. Outside of that, widely scattered showers and storms on this next frontal boundary sliding through here on Thursday. And again, over the eastern Corn Belt where that upper level low is still sitting, we could get some widely scattered showers and storms. So it's really kind of this corridor here, okay, watching in through there, and that boundary sagging farther to the south that I'll be on the lookout for. I'll give you much more detail about this in my short range forecast, which comes out tomorrow morning. Let's now get here. This is over the next week what we're looking at in terms of total accumulated precipitation from the 0Z model runs from the European and from the GFS. There are some places where there's decent agreement, specifically right in through here in both models. Now, where there's disagreement, look at what the GFS is doing over here to parts of the Eastern Corn Belt where the European is not. Look at what's going on up in parts of the North Central Plains. Certainly active, but with the retreat of the jet stream pattern due to that weak zonal flow, we've now taken this low pressure center I thought was going to be moving through the North Central Plains toward the end of this week and weekend. It's changed. It's moved a little bit farther to the north. Doesn't mean we're not going to have a lot of thunderstorm activity. You can see it in both models here in the North Central Plains, but certainly a different look as to what we are expecting for this upcoming weekend. We do see some agreement in the weaker monsoonal flow out here in the desert southwest, but what is going on right here through the tropics? We are certainly going to have to talk about that in the next few moments here as well. Now, this is week 1 precipitation. To show you out to the next 9 days, this is the National Blended Model from the National Weather Service. This just tells me where they are seeing some pretty good agreement, and they are seeing some strong agreement right in through here with some heavier rainfall chances over the coming days, specifically that particular corridor right in through there. So initially flow this way, but then we're going to be watching what's happening right along this corridor with some heavier rainfall. Outside of that, we could go ahead and say things are relatively dry compared to normal. Down here in the south, though, again, I'm going to tell you what's going on here. To give you some more confidence, this is days 6 through 8. So here we are next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And once we get beyond week 1 into week 2, we do start to see that this particular region showing up in our analog forecasts as having a better chance than not at being slightly wetter than average. Same thing for parts of the southeast. And going out to days 9 through 11, again with our analog forecast, we do start to see that the Eastern Corn Belt getting down into the southeast does have a better chance at being on the wetter than average side. So we have some mixed signals here from the blended model versus what we've got here from our analogs. So let's now switch back to our ensemble models to see where the agreement comes back together. On the left, European. On the right, GFS. These are their ensemble forecasts for week 2. This is only week 2 precipitation. Now look at this. Parts of the Mid-South, parts of the Southeast showing up wet in both models. Parts of the North Central Plains and Western Corn Belt showing up wet in both models, and that also includes Michigan, and Wisconsin and Minnesota. Canadian prairies shown up wet as well. So we do have some model agreement here overall, and this would signal that there are showing up as chances for the eastern part of the Corn Belt, some of those regions that were very dry, to get some much needed precipitation. Now, again, we're going to have to talk about what's going on right down here in the tropics in the next few moments here, because we are seeing right here on the tail end of a front that keeps hanging out down here, repeated shower and thunderstorm activity in this vicinity. Now, it's too close to land, I think, to really get organized into something more substantial, and wind shear might keep some of this at bay, but we do see these tracks in through here where we could be potentially bringing some lower pressure, not a hurricane, but some lower pressure. Meanwhile, the main development region is very quiet, at least for the next 10 days here across the open Atlantic. So nothing coming off of Africa that is of major concern right now. We can see it maybe a little bit better by looking at precip anomalies. Very dry in through here, but again, this sector is looking wetter than average, okay? And just to show you, there is model confidence that in the next 15 days, this quarter has multiple chances of bringing in showers and thunderstorms and wetter conditions. Eastern Corn Belt, we're going to have to be watching once we get out of the chances for some showers today and tomorrow. It's going to be watching week 2 for what could be happening in the Eastern Corn Belt, okay? So that's kind of our near-term look. If we had to get worried about having too much rain this fall, this is what I want you to be thinking about with me, all right? I'm rewinding the clock to last October. What we're looking at here is August 20th through October 21st of 2018. If you see white on this map, it is an area that saw less than normal precipitation. Where you see any color, it's looking at percent of normal over 100%. And there's a corridor right in through here that saw between 200 and 700% of normal rainfall. So that's twice as much or 7 times as much as normal. On the eastern side of the country, Gordon, Michael, and Florence certainly brought an enormous amount of rainfall, but this is what gave us the wettest harvest on record. At least this is what we saw. Massive flooding in Wisconsin, massive flooding down here in parts of Texas, and this delayed harvest in some places. Well, I saw some harvesting of corn in January this past year when we should have been harvesting it in October. That's what delay we got out of last year's harvest. Now, what got us there is an important lesson to learn. We had a strong but relatively highly amplified flow pattern in the jet stream that featured a broader trough sitting here over the western United States, a large ridge that built up into the Gulf of Alaska, and a large subtropical ridge that sat right here just off the East Coast. Now, what we teach here is that when you come out of a trough, the trough is located here, and then into a ridge. I'll kind of draw a squiggly line to show you the axis of the ridge. Remember, it is between the two that you have your best upper level support for tropical systems. Watch this again. When you see that flowing through there, we have great upper level divergence, and that simply means we're uncorking the atmosphere to allow it to rain a lot. Meanwhile, little hurricanes like Michael, not little but incredibly powerful Cat 5 hurricane, snuck in under this flow. But that opened the Gulf of Mexico and just dumped an enormous amount of rain while cooling off this section of the U.S. and Canada. If we are worried about fall doing this again, that's the pattern that we're going to have to be worried for. So I start to ask myself what got us there. So let me take you back to last October. We were seeing a few things. The emergence of warm water in through here, and cooler water on this side and this side of it, all right? We did have warm water in the North Pacific, but we had cool water sitting in this region and cooler water right up here next to the Greenland. Now, that stripe in through there of cooler water was important to see, and I want you to see it because I'm about to compare this pattern to what we are having this year. So keep this in mind. Emerging El Nino along the coast, all right? That was the first key. Okay, what did that give us? That gave us, from August to October of last year, a flow pattern that featured something like this. Big ridge that went over Alaska that got tucked into a trough that went here in parts of the Hudson Bay over toward Greenland. Meanwhile, a southerly branch of the jet stream came out like this and went screaming out of the desert southwest to right around this ridge. That was the pattern that made it so wet last harvest. What did that do to the upper level winds of the atmosphere? Well, take a look at them over here. We saw, wherever you see these colors, faster than normal zonal winds, that's east to west winds. Again, same time period, August through October, right in through here. So the story is if the flow stagnates over the southeast and over Alaska and parts of Russia, between it, the flow gets going very fast. This was accompanied by the development of an El Nino and higher than average global winds at this time. So keep that in mind because right now, this is what we've got. There are some similarities. We do see warmer than average conditions here and low sea ice concentration. We do see some cooler water in the North Atlantic, but it's not in the same configuration. It's much warmer right here south of Greenland. What is not in phase? Look at this. The emergence of some cooler water associated with more La Nina-like weather has come out of here off the west coast of South America. And that is our big wild card because normally we don't see warm water here when we see cool water emerging there. So this, what I'm trying to tell you is this is a different look than what we had a year ago. And that's important because a year ago was the wettest harvest on record. What's going on with El Nino? Well, take a look at this. In early August, we saw this large blob of cooler colors here on this Hofmüller diagram. Now, what does that mean? That means in the Central Pacific, wherever you see the blue, these were strong easterly winds, strong trade winds. That is more indicative of La Nina than El Nino. In the coming days, the Central Pacific here is not exhibiting strong behavior one way or the other, which means we don't have the dominant El Nino signal. We lost that back in July. Longer term, take a look over here. We do see that our global models are wanting to take, if you just kind of average the wave packet, and yes, it has a lot of spread, we want to keep this back into INSO-neutral territory, which means we're going into a fall. Unlike last year where we were developing an El Nino, we are now going into fall this year where we are losing that El Nino. Now, it's not the only factor in our fall weather, but it's a dominant one, and that's why we're talking about it here. Speaking of temperatures, now that we've kind of understood a bit of the changes compared to a year ago on precipitation, look at this. Yesterday's high temperatures all across the southern half of the United States scorched, triple-digit heat in a lot of places. Today, we're going to be keeping our extreme heat much farther to the south, closer to the Gulf Coast, compared to where we were yesterday. But I want to do an analysis for you looking at the longer-term temperature patterns based upon what you just saw with precipitation. We need to preface this with this map. This map is looking at growing degree day unit anomalies. This is using the corn formula here from the 1st of March all the way until yesterday. Now, what I want you to see here is that, yes, the southeast has just been hot. They're way ahead. We have played catch up, though, in this area after having a very cold start to the year and very wet start to the year. Where we're still in deficit is everywhere that we see the blues. Okay? And what's important about that, and I'm only focusing here east of the Rocky Mountains, what's important about this is the analysis I want to show you next. Okay, the next series of maps, these are specifically for corn. Are we looking at corn maturity, so the variety of corn you planted, like 110-day corn, which is shown here. And what I have done is this. I've taken the total accumulated growing degree day units from June 1st. So all of this analysis is from June 1st. I've added all of those up, and then I'm going to add on to them the average number of growing degree day units we receive all across the country to October 15. Why October 15? For this part of the United States, that is the average kind of climatological first date of a frost. Maybe I should make that circle a little bit farther to the north, right in through there. So you see what I'm doing? I'm taking what we've got, adding to what we normally get all the way to October 15th, and what you need to see is anything that is in white will not reach the critical number of growing degree day units if you planted 110-day corn on June 1st. The probability of it not finishing, well, if it's in white here, we don't see that happening, okay? Now, this is what it looked like for 105-day corn. This is 100-day corn, 95-day corn, and 90-day corn. Now remember, this analysis is if you planted on June 1st or later. That's what you have to see here. If you planted earlier, this isn't a factor. But if you planted on June 1st, which a lot of this crop was, or later, this is what we're worried about. So this leads me naturally into my temperature forecast. Take a look at it. Over the next 5 days, the country continues to stay split north-south on the temperature pattern. Hot south, cooler in the north. Days 5 through 10, we can see this upper level trough beginning to dig here, but it's got a much more, well, west to east trajectory, not digging farther to the south. Therefore, we keep a big section of the United States warmer than average. Hooray for that. We need to get that heat and keep that heat in place. But going out now to the end of the month of August, I've got you out to day 10 through 15. This takes you out to August 29th. We see that the western United States is warming, and we see some cooler weather moving into the Canadian prairies and north central plains. In last week's long-range update, I said we got to watch this carefully. This is now the first full week of September. We see the only places hanging on to the warmer bias are the western part of the United States and a slight cool bias in the Canadian prairies and north central part of the U.S. Now, we don't want that. We certainly don't want to see that. This is not fear of frost, okay? Don't think that. This is just cooler than average weather. If I keep going, this is September 7th through the 14th, cooling through here. Taking this continuing out 14th through the 21st, I'm a little concerned about this pattern setting up. See the cooler air that's tucked into here, ridging over the southeast, bringing in the warmer conditions? This could mean toward the middle and into September that this area might show up wetter than average. We do have some hints for that, but at this point, it's just some speculation out here in the longer term. Remember, we're out more than a month in the forecast right now. I'm just showing you what we're concerned about moving forward. Okay, so I have to keep with this analysis and say, what's the chances of our October and really our September and October being cold, risk of an early frost, or really, really wet? Well, we come back again to these features. It is very rare to have El Nino fading with still such warm water in the North Pacific. And that's throwing a wild card in everything. So let me tell you what I'm watching, okay? Watch this with me. Fall temperature ideas first. If we had a strong El Nino, strong El Ninos often lead to the pattern you see here in the upper left-hand corner. Big El Ninos tend to be correlated with colder weather in the eastern half of the United States for October and September. all right? We don't have that right now. We have a fading El Nino, but we do at the same time have this warm blob in the North Pacific. And because it is out of phase with El Nino, normally if there's warm in the North Pacific, it's also warm in the Central Pacific. That is a source of major uncertainty, bullet point number 2. Arctic sea ice concentration is low. What does that tend to mean? It tends to mean more highly amplified flow pattern across the northern hemisphere. And we do need to continue to watch the position of the subtropical ridge, because a year ago that ridge shoved way over to the east and, to the eastern United States, that's the western Atlantic, and soaked us. Currently, that ridge is way off coast. It's way out there in the open Atlantic. We want to leave it out there if we don't want to have major precipitation problems this fall. What are my concerns? Well, here's what would be ideal. If we kept the jet stream flow weak, and we had, if any blocking, it was low amplitude, that would be perfect. Keep the jet stream in Canada. That prevents us from going cold too early, and that also prevents too much moisture stress at the end of the season. A wild card, the Mount-Julian Oscillation has been in its null phase for a while. It is going to break out. It always does. That is going to adjust our pattern. What does that mean? My confidence anything beyond the next 10 to 15 days is relatively low in these patterns. And the tropics are going to wake up in the Atlantic, and when they do, that is going to shift around our global temperature patterns. That's what happens. We're redistributing heat when they come out. So that's going to be something to watch. So what I did was I went back and I found the warmest Octobers we have on record for the central part of the U.S. I'm talking from here to here. And when we look at that, generally what we end up getting is a trough in the Gulf of Alaska and a trough over Greenland. That allows warm air just to move north in the central part of the United States. If we have high amplitude ridges over Greenland and over Alaska, you get the exact opposite. So what we're going to have to watch out for all fall long is Alaska and Greenland. If you live in the middle part of the United States, Alaska and Greenland. Now, for these warm Octobers, they were often very cool and very active coming out of the tropics, and very cool here over parts of the Pacific Northwest, bringing in the wet season very early. So these are all the things that I'm going to be watching. And if you watch this and you're like, I kind of feel like your confidence is low and that you're not seeing a pattern emerge, you're 100% right. I don't. And that is why long-range forecasting is so challenging. So what I focused on in this video was what to watch with me with time. All right? We'll go and wrap this one up right here. We Nutrien Ag Solutions, thank you for your attention. Hope you look forward to our next long-range update coming out next week. Talk to you again soon. Thank you.